right. Welcome, Boundless Gratitudes audience. We have the pleasure and the privilege to say hello to Mr. Kevin Hall, who wrote the book Aspire, the Power of Words 12 years ago. And that book has been internationally renowned and sold on a consistent basis through all these years. And the reason why is because the principles that he outlines in this book are as present today and as significant in living our lives as they are when he spoke to them 12 years ago. So I'm so glad to bring my dear brother Kevin on in front of you to ask a few questions to see who he is beyond being the author. I met him at a Genshai experience 6 years ago in St. George, Utah. That'll be a conversation we'll have later. And we have gone through a journey together. And the longer that we stay on, that we accompany each other, the closer we become. And I just appreciate who he is as a fellow human being on this amazing journey of life.
David, I just want to say one thing, thank you. And when somebody gives you a compliment, I often say, stop and pause, don't chase it away, and say, thank you, I accept and receive that with immense gratitude. And I hope that's one of the first things you'll learn here, but I want to express my gratitude for you. David has been in a mastermind that I do, a huge contributor to our Genshai community, has opened up my mind. We talked about it on a call this morning. We started talking about reflections and some new writing I'm working on. And boy, you came just front and center into my heart and soul. So I count you as a dear friend. I consider you a friend, a brother. I don't know sometimes when we're talking, who's coaching, who, you or me. And so just grateful to be on this call with you and just excited about what you have done to help people reflect in an elevated way. And you do that. You have such a unique way of expressing yourself, your vocabulary, your understanding, and you have modeled that the biggest room in the world is the room for self-improvement, as Harvey McKay taught me. You are committed to growth and development. And when we grow, we're happy. It doesn't lead to happiness. We are happy when we're growing. And I've seen that with you, and you've blessed my life. So thank you, Dave.
Thank you, dear brother. Thank you so much. So here's my first question for you. You've had some mentors in your life. Who are 1 to 3 that really made a difference for you to spark your interest and your passion for living life all in?
Number 1, I would say my mother. And that's an interesting comment from a boy who was one of 2 boys born to a teenage alcoholic, which my mother was. And my grandmother was an alcoholic. And my grandmother would say to my mother, you'll never marry the right guy. You'll never have a clean house. You'll never get the right job. Well, my mother recovered in my teen years. And she went on to become a great drug and alcohol abuse counselor. She never heard the word Genshai. We'll talk about that later, but it means to never treat another person in a manner that would make them feel small, including yourself. But she lived it. She was hearing some of the harshest of your own parent. I love my grandmother, but was not a kind alcoholic. My mother was a kind alcoholic, and she would grab my chin. David, I had hair then. I had a little widow's peak, and she would look me in the eye and she'd say, Kevin, and I hope you don't hear anything from this interview, you hear this. She'd say, you can do anything you want. You can achieve any dream or aspiration as long as you leave other people better for having met you. Now, she was 4'11", 98 pounds, soaking wet, little beautiful, gorgeous redhead. But when you crossed her, if she heard that you were unkind or making fun of, being sarcastic, which all teenagers do, and maybe I did a little too much. Oof. You don't want her coming home from work and saying, hey, I'd rather her just beat me than say, I am so disappointed. I heard what you said, and that's not how we treat people. That, I don't think you've ever heard me speak at one of our events, David, without honoring my mother.
Yes. Yes.
My wife, I'm going to group two in one. I get three.
All right.
My wife, Sherry, is one of the most remarkable human beings you'll ever meet. And she treats people so kindly. We've been married now. Is it that long, David? 43 years
Oh,
coming
good
up.
for you. You remember the number.
I better. It's December 17th, 43 years.
Yeah.
And she was love at first sight for me. It took her a little longer to feel that love. I asked her to marry me 5 times. For any sales professionals on this call, you generally get 5 no's before you get a yes. So I kept asking, but I overmarried, as John Maxwell called it when he met Sherry. He said, boy, you outpunted your coverage. You overmarried. And she's someone that I get to share my life with, just like you and Jana. You did the same thing with that sweet angel of joy and light in Jana. And I know Sherry and Jana are good friends, and we count you both as dear friends. But I have a wife who's valiant to her purpose, who is selfless and just loves people, cares about people. And she allows me, David, to do what I do. And I'm a little bit crazy. I'm a little out there doing long rides and traveling around the world and pushing my comfort zone. And she's had a huge impact on me and how we raise our children, our family. And if success is knowing that those who know you best love and respect you most, that's one of my next mentor. We'll talk about John Maxwell, who's taught me that. Sherry models that with our family. And so I would recommend do what you love with those you love. And as we're getting into our golden years, I'm starting chapter 2 of my life, David. It might be a really short book, but it's chapter 2, and I'm going to stick with that. And I want to spend more time with her, more time with my kids, and more time with my grandkids. And so the next mentor would be John C. Maxwell.
I just want to say something before you move on to John. I have such an affinity for how you are expressing your love, your devotion, your care for your beloved. And I know you've been through your challenges, you've been through your joys, you've been through some struggles, you've been through quite a journey. And what I've found in going through those experiences with my wife is one is either on the bus or off the bus. And if you choose to be on the bus, you only become closer, more enriched, more mutually supported, and you both shine.
So again, that's what you are so good at, being on the bus. I can imagine leaving the bus that Sherry's on. I mean, Jana's had some serious health issues, and just with her resilience and her positive attitude, her faith, she's here and she's alive and she's a miracle. And so is Sherry.
Yeah.
And doing what I do, speaking, there were 2.5 years where I didn't speak other than my event. Because I didn't dare leave her side. And she had a lung disease. And when the doctor finally put the blue dye in her system at the emergency room, he's a neighbor of mine, he saved her life. I would drag her into the shower because she was so sick. She didn't want to go to the hospital again. She didn't want to go to anywhere, but she couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And we thought she might die. And her best friend came down, her mother came down to help me. My daughter quit school to help. And I remember he handed a paper and said, she's got a syndrome, ground glass, broken glass syndrome. Lung disease is a big issue. I'm reading a book called Breathtaking. I showed you that this morning. And we could do better with our environment because, you don't have clean air to breathe. It's a big issue. And he said, read this paper, but don't read it to your wife. And it said, majority of people that have what she has, it's not going to leave her lungs. And she's not going to be alive, just like Janet was given a little bit of a death sentence. He's not saying this is going to happen, but her expectancy is 15 months. And we're sitting here now.
Yeah.
4 years removed. And
yeah.
She's still progressing. She's not 100% there, but she is returning to full health and wellness because of her love for her family. And we did grow on that bus together. And we saw it differently. We wanted it differently. We had a few Victim conversations, why me? Does God not care about us? What did I do wrong? Bad things happen to good people all the time.
Well, what I've a profound aspect of who you are is that I don't experience you going down the rabbit hole. You're aware of the rabbit hole, and your wife has been aware of it, and you may clamber down just a tad, and then you realize that life is so much bigger than this hole, and you have and you both have such a presence of positivity, aspiration, and commitment to being all you can be, and trusting that the universe and spirit will support you. Great example of that. So thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I get emotional thinking about her journey, and I don't want her to suffer for one more second. She still has challenges, but we know, and for each of us, I'm going to share my two mentors, Stephen R. Covey and John C. Maxwell. They both taught me this in one way or another. Stephen's vocabulary is begin with the end in mind. That's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. He's impacted over 50 million people. I mean, inspires about 1 million people, 50 million people all over the world.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And if in your mind you say, hey, it's going to work out, it'll work out. If you believe it, we've talked, David, about some family things. If you say, you know what, it's all going to work out, it'll work out. You may not know how it's going to work out, but you create that vision that it's going to work out. And what Stephen's work for habits and establishing habits, a habit in some cultures, it's an article of clothing. It's what you wear. It's something you put on every day. And he just changed the whole paradigm of thinking of, yeah, let's focus on habits. And I'll always remember Stephen saying, Kevin, when you write this book, he wrote the foreword for my book. We would talk frequently, and he would say, write it for the reader, not for the writer. So if there's somebody who wants to write a book, there's the best advice I've ever received. Write it for the reader, not for the writer. Speak it for the listener, not for the speaker. And he was all that. And one thing about Stephen, he didn't just, speak or write the 7 habits. He lived them. He lived them. And boy, I miss him. I miss him, the influence, his teaching about, you've heard these words in our mastermind, Dave. Don't focus on success or achievement. I remember the first time he said that. I was in Dana Point, right? And he said, Kevin, focus on contribution, not on achievement or success. What do you mean by that? I remember saying, and he said, in the Western world, success and achievement, it's kind of got a beginning and an end. But when you move up the ladder and you start to focus on contribution, you'll achieve more than your wildest dreams. And contribution is enduring. It never ends. And so that created a shift for me. And the fact that we can live a legacy, not just leave one, but live one. And I'll never forget. And there's just so many valuable lessons. And one other thing about Stephen, he would speak to audiences. He would command $50,000, $75,000, I think sometimes $100,000 in a private jet to speak. Recognized as one of the 25 most influential thinkers of the last century. He didn't get caught up into any of that. And if you were with him, you were with him. He wasn't looking over the bigger, better. I had him come in and speak to a hospitality group of CEOs, 200 of the most amazing people. When he was done, he was talking to Sherry and I. He's not looking for the head. He's not looking for his next speech. He was present. He could do something with a big group, but then he could be one-on-one. So his ability to seek to understand before seeking to be understood. And here's one thing I was reading last night, Dave. Do you know how long an average doctor, a medical practitioner, think of what we're going through right now, how much time they give a patient to talk before they cut them off? Do you know what the average doctor does? Now, I know there's some incredible ones. I'm not. 15 seconds.
Really? Average?
average. So, hey, tell me how you're feeling. Jana, Sherry, 15 seconds, they're cut off. The outstanding ones, just listen for
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
Just like you're doing right here, give them 2 minutes. So his ability to get into somebody else's world and just seek to understand, think how that could change the world if people would, instead of blaming and shaming and, well, you think this and here's what's going on, just get in the other people's shoes, quit blaming and shaming, and just seek to understand and maybe come up with a third option. There's your way, there's my way. And he said, there's our way.
Yes.
September 11th, there was a lot of our way. Everybody galvanized when that happened. Right now, there's a lot of finger pointing, and we could come together a lot better, a lot less judgment, a little more listening, and a little more our way versus my way or your way. John C. Maxwell. Well, I love Stephen Covey. He's no longer alive. By the way, Stephen, his legacy was so important. He even had a place up in West Yellowstone. I stayed there once, called Legacy. And when he passed away, all 9 children, he had 8 birth children, 1 adopted child, all of his grandchildren, but 2 of grandchildren were at his bedside. Right. And he even described, visualize the life you want to live and who's coming to your funeral and what was said.
Yeah.
And I went to the memorial service and it was more than you could have ever dreamed of. John C. Maxwell, he's the preeminent thought leader on leadership. And he doesn't just talk about the 17 irrefutable laws of leadership, he lives it. And he is traveling the world. Well, Stephen and John, I go into companies, I work with top companies all around the world, top individuals, Olympic athletes, CEOs, highly enlightened people like you, Dave. Stephen and John took their craft to the level where they're sitting down with cabinets of countries and helping them change their thinking. I was talking to Chad Hymas yesterday, and Chad had just been at an event for John Maxwell, even during COVID, but they met outside and they kept it safe, and they brought in fans and air conditioners, 2,500 people in a foreign country, and he is impacting individuals there. What I love about John is that he starts his day. And somebody gave him my book at his church. He lives in Jupiter, Florida. And someone that liked the Spire when it came out said, hey, I go to the same church. I'll give him my book. He tracked me down after he read my book to affirm me. I mean, he doesn't need to do that. When he took Sherry and I to dinner at the Grand America Hotel, been over 10, 11 years ago, and he taught me some things. And he said, it's really important how you start your day. And it's really important you start your day on your terms. And he said, I start my day by saying, who can I add value to today? What an incredible way. You do that, David. You're adding value to people all the time. Who can I add value to today? But he said that then creates a second question. Well, I'm going to add value to somebody. I better make myself more valuable. And then as he makes himself more valuable, and I think he said at dinner that night, it was kind of a harsh statement, but it's true. He said, there's nothing more pathetic than a leader who's quit growing. And boy, is that ever true.
Or any human being.
Any human being. And
yes.
And he taught me what I said earlier. Growth doesn't lead to happiness, Kevin. Growth is happiness. And he made a shift right there for me. So,
which is interesting, Kevin, that you share that. Growth is happiness. Is at times when we're growing and when I'm growing, it is not fun. I'm not appreciating it. And yet, if there's just a deeply inset devotion to growth, eventually I come around and I go, I understand now why that was necessary for me to step forward, to step out, to move along. And then I appreciate it. So and then there's a fullness that unfolds. So it's like growth requires swimming through the waves of life and trusting that we will always come out on the crest. when we're done going through the waves.
Huge insight, Dave. And growth isn't always comfortable, is it?
Nope.
But that's the path to happiness, to everything that we want that's really meaningful and significant. It's right at the edge of our comfort zone. And that's why Stephen emphasized, hey, focus on significance, not on success. And that's what these two do so well. So I'm in love with I'm in love with John Maxwell because of the kind of person he is. He had a big event. Sherry and I went out. We were at dinner. I even asked him for a blessing, David. I said, would you give me a blessing? I know you're just going to speak, but I'll come to your hotel room later tonight. I'll fly into Florida later when there's more time. People are lining up. When I'm going to speak, I want to go get ready to speak. He knelt down and he shared a prayer. You know, we read the prayer of a good man, of a faithful person can create miracles. And he prayed for Sherry, and I'll never, ever. I went and wrote it in a journal. Things that he shared started to happen. And he believed in me. Both Stephen and John say, Kevin, I believe in you. Believe means to be loved. And so I think, well, Stephen said, Kevin, you're going to impact millions with your work. Millions of people. Really? Really? Well, if you believe it, I better start believing it. And John, the same thing. So it's a reminder. You know, I had a text, I won't share it, it's too personal. But and John's not big into texting. I don't even know that he does email, but we texted last week and I shared something exciting with him. And he responded back, you know, I'm happy for you. And he doesn't even have the new emojis. I shouldn't rat him out on this call on his phone, but he, I just thanked him. And at the end of the post, I invite him to go somewhere special. He and his wife, with my wife and I hope that can happen. He said, I'd love that if it works out. And then I said, I'll keep you posted as it unfolds. Admire and appreciate you and all the good that you do in the world. And like I just said, when somebody gives you a compliment, you say, accept and receive it. I don't know if you can see that, John.
It's not clear. No.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how to make it so it's not reflecting. But he took it to another level. Who can I add value to today when I said, I admire and appreciate you and all the good that you do, and did some namaste light emojis. And he texted back, we both do good. So here he affirmed me and edified me. He didn't chase it, well, Kevin, I don't do good. He said, he took it to a whole nother level, which he does with everything he does. He spends, Dave, 5 hours every day on personal development and growth. I remember him saying, Kevin, find a chair that you like to sit in, find a place that gives you ideas, and exercise. And he likes to swim and meditate and think. And I said, how much do you do that every day? And I'm thinking, you know, an hour, that's a lot to do, an hour and a half, 2 hours. He said, oh, about 4.5 to 5. And I said, what? He said, oh, about 5 hours every day. He's not worried about what somebody thinks about his schedule. Because like Stephen Covey, he's focused on contribution. And how can I grow? He gets help. He's got an incredible writer that helps him, Charlie Whitesell, and Stephanie Whitesell that helps with his social media. But wow. So you take his thoughts on leadership, Stephen's thoughts on habits, and my work is about words. Make up those habits and then make up a leader. That's what brings me alive, David. And you know from our call this morning, and purpose. My subtitle for Aspire, you said it's power of words, and it is, but it's discovering your purpose through the power of words. And we all have a purpose, and we were created for and with a purpose and gifted for that purpose.
When you get up in the morning, Kevin, do you have a daily practice or ritual that moves you forward?
I do. I mean, I express gratitude. I'm a person of faith. My highest values are faith, family, and freedom. And so I express gratitude to my Creator for the gifts that I have and the opportunities that I have. I'm in a pretty big writing mode right now, so maybe that shift is a little bit. I'm hardly even taking time to go to the bathroom or eat right now. but that's passion. I get to do it. I take care of myself. I didn't always do that, David. You've seen my health.
Yeah.
That, I'm back or close to, it fluctuates a little, 5 or 10 pounds to my high school weight. And I've given myself permission to do what I love with those I love. And I love to bike.
Yeah.
And so I have friends that I bike with. Sherry has an e-bike now, somebody that, hey, you're not going to be able to breathe again. We can go out and bike together and we can talk. And so I think of Stephen saying, Kevin, take care of the goose that lays the golden egg. Don't kill the goose, from that fable that lays the golden egg. And so I am shifting as I get to chapter 2 of my life, of taking a little bit better care of me, making sure that I'm eating something healthy, making sure that I'm doing something for me mentally, physically, spiritually, before I jump into May. And one thing I don't do, David, I don't get on social media. I don't get into I don't get into this 24/7 news thing that can be so negative. They're purveyors of pollution. I see this peripheral pollution that you can't even hear yourself think anymore. So I try to have that. Today was special. Right now, I'm getting up at 5:55. You can get up whenever you want, but there's magic to those numbers. I don't know if you know that. Look up what 555 means. And today I was up more like at 4:30 because I had so many ideas for this book. And you need to get sleep. I'm not trying to get the least amount of sleep. But 555 says it's my day. And something good is going to happen today. And as I started yesterday, Sherry said, go get him, Tiger. She needed a little more sleep, and I want her to be recovered. And I'm more of a lark. She's more of an owl, maybe. But when you start your day, get yourself right. You heard Brandon Steiner at one of our events. He said, don't put your feet down until mentally you get right. And I use some affirmations. I'm an unrepeatable miracle. I am, and then I use those I am statements to get me grounded for the day, because 77% of what we think in 1970 was negative. 77% of our thoughts in 1970, when Chad Hemstetler wrote, what do we say when we talk to ourselves, is negative. I think, David, that's probably more like 80 or 90%, right?
How was that? How did that number come about?
It was a scientific number, and human behavioral. So it wasn't just a guess or a number. And I think of that and I think, no way could 77% of my thoughts be negative. But just think of this 24/7 news.
Yeah, look at the news. It's so much more than 77%. As I reiterate time and again, life is a diligent exercise, a commitment to elevation, and a practice in patience, trust, and opening up to new possibilities. We have got to do the work. And if we're just hanging out, waiting for the news and for the neighbors to tell us what's going on, we're missing the boat. And so what you do in the morning to get up and orient yourself, as I do, and sometimes I wake up and I'm a little off. Then I start moving. I can tell
the difference when I haven't done it, and I don't always do it. Sometimes we jump into the thick of thin things, right?
Yeah.
But you can see your day. How you start your day is how you're going to end your day. Always.
So our work is each and every day, and I see that until the day I die, and then when it's time to die, may we both just say, you know what, I'm ready, and then step over.
Absolutely, and that's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to be, David. Yeah.
So let me ask you another question here. Kevin, you have a deeply ingrained spirit of sparkle, of brightness, and care for others. And how does that fit into your vision for life, your overarching vision for life?
Well, I think that is life. That's living a life that's meaningful and significant, because your gifts aren't about you. I mean, I'm only good at 2 or 3 things, hopefully coaching, writing, speaking, connecting. That's about it. But those gifts aren't about me. My leadership, my vision's not about me. My purpose isn't about me. It's about serving those who need your gifts, who need your vision, who need your leadership, who need your purpose. And then it makes it even more meaningful to do that. So again, that little 5-year-old boy that my mother, who's being told, I'm amazed, David, that she could break the chain. You know, I'll coach people that have been abused mentally, physically, in other ways. And I have to stop and say, now just understand, this abuse had nothing to do with you. Haters are hurters, and the person that was hating on you was hurting. And I've had people just break down, grown men, grown women, say, I always thought it was my fault. No, it's not your fault. My mother was getting mental abuse from her alcoholic mother, my grandmother, saying, you're not enough. You're never going to get the right job. She married several times. You're never going to marry the right guy. But she broke the chain with me. And instead of repeating those to me, she said, you can do anything. You can achieve big goals as long as you make other people feel better, as long as you leave other people better for having made.
A wonderful lesson.
So that, I forget it, I get off track, but that, and just when someone helps you, and you know how we do that in our community, when a server comes up, this isn't a Geico commercial where they joke and say they don't need to know your name, but you need to know their name. And you should engage with them. And I watched you once at Deer Valley meet that server that day.
Yeah.
He became a friend of ours. And they have a life, and no one is any more or any less. If you ever feel superior to someone in a certain setting, I think that's what my mom was trying to teach me. That's what I learned later. Then you're likely going to feel inferior to somebody else in a different setting. We're all the same. We're all on this path together. Nobody's any more or any less. And that helps as we go through the day. And we see some thunderclouds come in. And it's been a little bit dark lately, right? 2019, 1 out of 10 people would say, I'm feeling a little bit anxiety. I'm a little depressed. It's feeling a little dark or hopeless outside. 2 years later, David, it's quadrupled. 4 out of 10 people are saying on a regular basis they feel that way. That's an epidemic right there.
And it's all the more imperative when you go out, Kevin, and you see the cleaners, or you go to the bike shop, or you go to the gas station and you say hello to people. And I will do the same. We look them in the eye and we thank you for the service that you're providing. That just sharing some kind of a glint of hope, of sparkle, of possibility with people. People are thirsting, and it just takes each of us to remember that we are lights to help others recognize their own lights.
Yeah.
And you are a master at that.
Well, David, I thank you. I think one of the most important things we can do is share our abundance, right? We're stewards over everything. You're not going to take anything with you. And this isn't my idea, but when I am laid to rest, my family knows to cut out all the pockets out of everything I'm wearing. Just cut them out, because you're not going to take it with you. So my favorite charity is the person that's serving me. And these are necessary, important, dignified jobs. You think of how hard it is. Going to college, I was in the restaurant industry. You're on your feet all day long. When that server comes by, when they take care of you, that should be your favorite charity. And you want to leave 10% or 5%, but give them 20 or 25 or 30, whatever you've got in your pocket, leave them and leave a little note. When you stay at a hotel and that room was clean, can you imagine cleaning rooms every day? I've seen people very grateful, very thankful. You leave a note with $10 or $20. Hey, God bless you. Thanks for what you do. And you sign your name. Guess what? What you throw out, you're going to get back. And I've had people say, oh, Kevin, you're throwing 5s and 10s and 20s and 50s around. And you've been a financial planner, David. If you just save that, you're going to have so much in a bank account for that. I said, you know what? You're right. And there's a time to do that. But when someone is with respect and dignity, taking care of you, doing something that you don't have, the skills to do, or maybe the time, or you've chosen not to do it, look them in the eye and thank them, and then reward them for that.
Yes.
Reward them for that.
Yes. You may be the only acknowledgement that they've had all day or maybe all week. We have no idea the difference that we can make in that moment. People are starving for acknowledgement because too often they don't recognize their own value. And so at least we can remind them and then plant a seed of possibility for them to be aware.
And David, half the world goes to bed hungry every night. When someone delivers a beautiful meal to your table, takeout, that's a miracle in most of the world. And we should be a little more grateful for that. When we sleep in a nice room that's made, just expressing that gratitude. You heard this, you were part of creating this. Gratitude garners greatness. That's just expressing, you're in the G3, we could call it that. Gratitude garners greatness. When you do something for somebody and they don't really acknowledge it, for our children, we do and do and do, and then the emotional bank account that Stephen Covey talks about gets overdrawn. He says, I don't know if I want to help anymore. But when they come back and say, oh, I can't thank you enough, real honest, not patronizing gratitude, you can't do enough for them. You say, oh, I'm so grateful. So that's what I love about traveling to a little village in Switzerland, or going to Greece, or going to Italy, and you go to the market. We're all the same. We're not for the places we go, the people that we meet, or the books that we read. And you go to the market, you go to the butcher, you go to the bike shop, they all know each other. They all love each other. They're all family. And they say, oh, go see my brother, go see my sister, go see my mother. And pretty soon, you stay in that village, you get to know everybody.
Yes.
And in our Western view, we need the bigger yacht or the bigger house or the extra cars. I do have a little fetish for bikes. I want a few extra bikes. I'm like a woman with a purse. You don't have one purse. You don't have one bike. You got a gravel bike, a downhill bike, 20 bikes. So every book I write now, I get a bike, David. So I'm going to write a bunch of books. I want more bikes in my garage. But, they can say in that little village, I'm enough and I have enough. Isn't that amazing when they say, I have enough? And they have that love and that respect and that dignity for everyone. It's just amazing.
So there's an individual that has been most prominent in your life, and I had the privilege to meet him. His name is Praveen. And will you share with us the story of your spontaneous meeting with him and the transformation in your life that he moved you to realize?
Thank you for asking that, because I'd be remiss if we finished this without sharing with a mentor. I want to preface it with a statement you've heard from me, David. When we get on path and we get on purpose, we'll meet people who've been waiting on our path all along. They were just waiting for us to get on path. So I'd encourage you to be present for who's in front of you that moment. Don't be looking for bigger, better, anything. They're there for a reason. There is divine orchestration. I'm in Vienna. I'd gone there on a special kind of a collection of people going there for really significant reason. But the biggest thing that happened was me walking into a fabric shop called the India Shop, just 50 steps from St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna, Austria, where the city was built around this cathedral. I have a daughter, Season, my second daughter, getting married. She's a fashion designer. I'm seeing this fabric. It looked like a jewelry store, David. It's just incredible. I think you've been there. Maybe you've seen it. And it's now called the Indie Store, but it was the India Store now. And as I walked in my last night, in came the Pied Piper, Praveen Cherkori, Cheerkoora, Cherkori, Cherkoora. And he had heard why I had been to Vienna. And we had been visiting with Viktor Frankl's widow and their family. And he knew Viktor, and he had sold him a scarf for his wife, Ellie. And he said, Kevin, you must be one of the greats. I just met him. Will you sign this book of greats? And David, you've signed the book, and it's a real book. It's not a made-up book. And it was just at Richard Branson's island. Richard Branson just signed it about 2 weeks ago. I might have sent you a picture of that. And he invited Sharon and I to come to Necker Island. But this book, it's 50 years old now. And there was royalty from India. Indira Gandhi had signed it. Viktor Frankl had signed it. And he said, here, sign this book of greats. Well, I didn't feel too Gandhiist. You must be the change you wish to see in the world. I didn't feel like royalty from India. And I said, I'm sorry, Praveen, but I can't sign your book. Mm. And he closed the store. He turned it over to his son, Hari. And he said, we need to go to dinner. And so we walked 2 blocks through the cobblestone steps. I remember the breath from it was so chilly, you could just kind of see it evaporate into the night. And we had a Chinese dinner. And we were hungry like you say, after Chinese dinner, you're still hungry. But I remember a 3-hour dinner with him. And he said, Kevin, I grew up in India where there's a caste system. And in our sacred writ, there's a word. And I want to teach you this word. And I want you to live this word. And I want you to practice this. Will you promise me that? Well, I didn't know that Praveen's mother lived with Gandhi. She was one of the 5 women that lived with Mirabine and Gandhi. And he actually turned her away when he went to scoop up salt when the British said, an Indian can't have salt. It's against the law to have salt. And he walked all the way across India and went to the ocean to demonstrate his freedom of choice that he could have salt. And he had turned Praveen's mother away. She wasn't pregnant with Praveen, but with his sister. And he said, when I would pass a beggar in the street in India, and if you've traveled to India, there's just abject poverty. Your heart he said, if I just tossed a coin, my mother would grab my ear and say, Praveen, you're not practicing Genshai. And Genshai is Genshai. And that one word is one of the reasons that my book is in over a dozen languages all over the world, because that resonates with people. And it means that you would, and I remember he said this, and I had a journal out that night. I wrote it down. It was like a surreal experience. By the way, Praveen was the preeminent tantric artist. In India, it's so tactile, their art. You paint things with your hands. He would do installations on mountains, on buildings that were just all over the world. I had no idea. I'm sitting in front of, the son of a woman who had lived with Gandhi, who'd been mentored by Gandhi, and who became one of the preeminent artists. I have some of his art in my home. It's just priceless to me. His art ended up selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I don't know that. But he's painting a picture for me with a word, a picture's worth 1,000 words. He gave me a word that was worth 1,000 pictures, and it was Genshai. And it means you would never treat another person in a manner that would make them feel small, including yourself. That was it. And David, you just soaked that in. And he said, promise me you'll never treat yourself small again. And I went back later, about a year or 2 later, with a film crew, and I signed the Book of Greats. The store was closed by the time.
Took you 2 years to do that, huh?
I'll have to look, but it was a year or 2.
Yeah.
Before I went back to Vienna, and I it's almost like a second home to us now. We travel there often. But that little guy, little Praveen Cherkori, with the intellect. We would walk through the streets of Vienna, Sherry and I, and he would call Gandhiji's granddaughter and just talk to her, not to impress me, just to check in and make sure she was okay. that word is sweeping the world, and it's changed my life. In our mirrors, you've been in our home, David, I don't know if you have, but in our home, in our guest mirrors, in our master bedroom, in my car, we have Genshai right on the mirror. Because you don't see the world as is, you see the world as you see yourself.
So Kevin, I just had a thought. So before you talked to Praveen, you did not know about Genshai, and he spoke to it as an ancient Hindu principle. It's been with his culture for
Thousands of years.
Yes. And yet in that evening when you met him and he asked you to sign that book and you didn't, and you went out and he spoke to you about what you had just ignored, so to speak, that was pivotal for you to be the instrument of the message of Genshai. Otherwise, how long would it have stayed? Would it have just been in a corner of the world reflective of a particular culture? Now it's an international awareness. So thank you, Kevin,
Well,
for stumbling.
Thanks for me stumbling there. And I wanted to sign it that night, but his son had the keys, locked up the shop, and I was flying out in a few hours the next morning. I was out late on a Friday. We had kind of one of those early morning red eyes coming out of Vienna. But yeah, that changed the course of my life, and it created a shift and a pivot. Not only how I saw other people, but more importantly, how I saw myself. Because Genshai is, kind of go big or go home. If you look at the other side of it, don't play small. Well, then start playing big. Start playing big. And he sure did. And the more I got to know him and stayed at his home in Jaipur, India, and the businesses that he owned and ran, it's just incredible. He was a big thinker because of that principle.
He was such a little man, and yet he was such a phenomenal presence.
What did you think when you saw him? When I had him speak at our first Genshai event, you weren't there, but it was almost like Gandhi stood up on the stage. And that's a big statement. I'd love to have had breakfast with Gandhi and say, how did you do what you did with no moral authority? How did you free, just hundreds of millions of Indians? How did you do that? But what did you think when you met Praveen? Because when he would come to an event, everybody wanted to have breakfast or lunch or dinner with him, because it was almost like he wasn't of this world. What did you think when you met him?
He was endearing. He exuded a gentleness, an acceptance, a sweetness of presence that inherently moved me to listen and to give thanks for the honor of being present to his wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one word he used a lot is magical. He'd say life is magical, and that's a good reminder. When we tap into our gifts, magic does happen, miracles happen. We are unrepeatable miracles. He's the one that taught me every person is an unrepeatable miracle. Those are Praveen's exact words.
So you have a passion for riding bicycles. Why? What's the big deal? Why do you enjoy it so much? What are the feelings that experience elicits for you? How does it serve you in the expression of a full life?
I think it's freedom. My values of faith, family, freedom. Just think when you're a little kid and you got on a bike and you'd say, God, I could go a lot further if I just pedal. I remember speaking with Richard Branson several years ago. We hit it off pretty quick. And I said, what were you like as a kid? And he described exactly how I felt. He said, I just wanted to see what was on the next horizon. He hasn't changed at all. He's hysterical. Yeah. He's so bright. He does so much good in the world. And he said, I would ride my bike to the edge of a river, and then I'd somehow cross the river or get on the bridge, and my parents would find the bike and say, what are we going to do with Richard? Because he's out exploring. And so it creates that sense of wonder. You do wander a little on a bike, but now I go out, and as I get in that rhythm and that cadence, it's good for my heart, it's good for my health. but just that road, I forget about everything.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Everything. You know how that is as a mountain climber, David.
Mm-hmm.
In the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, I wish I could take my grandkids. I have a grandson, Miles, aptly named as a two-time national champion. I have a son-in-law, Bryson, who made the world championship team 2 years ago in mountain biking. He's won the Leadville 100. It's a family thing. I got some of my kids and my son-in-law's into it now. They can all just kick my butt. So I've got to keep biking so that I can spend time with those that you love. Do what you love with those you love. I want to be able to have conversations with my grandson when I'm 70 and 80 and 90.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
hope to live a long life, and I want it to be a healthy, rich life. So I
Yes.
also do it for self-care. It's the best thing for me. It's not hard on my knees, but I can explore and I can go. Gravel bikes now, Dave. You can get on your gravel bike and say, I don't know where I'm going to go, but Sherry, you can track me. I'll see you in 10 hours. And you can see a whole new world out there.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to get enough water and have Apple Pay so you can buy something once in a while, but you can get home without anything. And I grew up where there wasn't much.
Yeah.
At a time. So if I needed food, I'd go knock on a door. I could smell a burger, chicken frying. I'd knock on the door of an apartment and say, hi, I'm Kevy. And I'd be in their fridge. I'd be by their stove. You wouldn't want to do that today, but I met a lot of people that way. And so I still like, me, I have a sense of adventure and I love just experiencing new things. And so for me, it's exercise, it's spiritual, it's mental, and it's physical. It's a little bit of everything for me. And I'm a lot happier husband, father, friend.
Yes.
I got a bike ride. Yeah.
Oh, good. So as a father, you're well practiced with 7 kids. What recommendation?
Unless Sherry's pregnant or adopting one. It's 6.
Okay. Well, 6. All right, give or take. All right. And then what recommendations do you have for parents today?
Well, boy, that's an ongoing process. But one, people say, oh, it's so hard when they become teenagers. I think it gets better every year, from the infant to the 2 to 3-year-old that's just exploring their body to 8 years old. It just gets better every year. And so just enjoy that growth and don't put in this, when they're going to be a nightmare when they're teenagers. I don't think that's the case. They're going to be challenges. And so the second thing that I learned, and I write about it in Inspire from Pat Murray. She was a former Miss America runner-up, Miss Hawaii. She worked with me at Franklin. And she had 2 rules with their kids. The beautiful Polynesian, they'd get together, her husband, Hari, they'd just kiss their kids on the lips. We didn't do that at our house. And I'd said, you have such a great relationship with your family. She said, here's 2 rules. Do it now. Establish it with your children. We had 3 daughters then. I think they were 8, 6, and 4. And she said, we can always be friends and we can always talk. And so I have pictures right here in my office, David. My daughter's given, but this is a daughter on her first day of my oldest summer, who you've met. And kind of got a little quote that she put in here, but my daughters are giving me, we can always talk and we can always be friends. That. And so when I traveled a lot, as we were building Franklin, that became Franklin Covey, I made a commitment. I didn't realize how much Sherry was doing. A little clueless as a young father, but I made a decision that I would be there when those kids started school. I didn't. Yeah. I want to give them a blessing, have a prayer with them, have something positive, walk them to school. It brings so much joy. And I was able to do that with all of my children. And we would say, we can always be friends and we can always talk. There's a day I'm going to be a jerk. There's a day you're going to be a jerk. We'll have emotional ups and downs, but we can still talk. And we can still be friends. That will get you through almost anything. And a mentor of mine, Thomas S. Monson, taught this principle: never let a problem to be solved be more important than a person to be loved. And I have done that poorly at times, and I've done that well. I mean, is your son's room that needs to be cleaned and the bed be made, is that more important than knowing having your son know that you love him unconditionally. Well, we know what's most important, but I'm kind of a neat freak. I want things clean. I like things in their place, but never let a person to be loved. And that's our family. You can't love your family. Who are you going to love?
Yeah.
Than a person to be loved. So, and just enjoy it. And traditions are so important, David. We haven't been able to do traditions the last couple of years, and right now we're planning a couple of things where, hey, if you can, we're going out to the Villa in the Oasis. I've got it reserved for 4 days after Christmas, 3 to 4 days together. And we're saying to all our kids, you want to come? We can spread out. We can go outside and just get back to those traditions and doing what you love with those you love. And I don't think we can say enough to our kids, I believe in you. I love you no matter what. Do you know there's nothing you could ever do that would make me not love you? And I think those things build, and just being there for them. When they have those big benchmarks and they have those red letter days, be there.
Yeah.
Be there.
Yeah. So when it's time, Kevin, to move to the other side, take the next step over, what is the legacy you would like to leave?
I'm writing about this in the 4 branches of a legacy, but the 3 or 4 questions that you're going to be asked at the end of your life is, did you love?
Yeah.
You're sitting there, if you have time to reflect on, did I love, and did I love unconditionally? Did I really make sure I loved myself so I could love others? I want to leave a legacy that I love myself enough that I could love others and teach them to love themselves so they could love others. That becomes a really nice ripple. Did I live? And did I live without regrets? No, you can't change the past. You don't need to use the past as a hitching post. You can use it as a guidepost. But did I push my comfort zone? Did I do things that scared me? Did I try things? Did I take risks, calculated risks that aren't going to hurt anybody, but they make me grow and they make me feel my breath. And so I want to be alive. I want to wait till the end and say, I want to be alive every day.
Yes.
Did I love? Did I live? Did I learn? Take those examples from Stephen and you and John Maxwell and devote time each day reflecting and growing and improving. Again, Harvey Mackay, the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement. There's no limit to how much you can grow.
Yes.
And I hope I'm growing to my last. I'll never retire, David. I told you I might be 106 and people come and I'm paying people to come and hear me speak. And then I just have a stroke while I'm speaking. That would be awesome, right? It'd be just awesome. But I hope I'm growing and improving and learning until my final breath. And then the last one is, did you light? That's what I want to leave, David.
Did you what?
Did you light? I helped with the Olympic slogan. There's some gold medals in that little frame right there. That's the 2002 Olympic Games. And on those medals, it says, light the fire within. I came up with the slogan, ignite the fire within, which became light the fire within. That's what I hope my legacy is for our family, for our children, for those brothers and friends like you whose paths we merge with. Did I light the path of another? Antonar Ivins said this, he who holds a lantern to light the pathway of his brother sees more clearly his own. And so just that we're lighting the path and we see ours clear. And then again, recap it with John Maxwell. Ultimately, success is knowing that those who know you best love and respect you the most. That's all that matters. You're not going to take, my pockets will be empty. They'll be taken out. They'll be sewed shut. I don't even want pockets. I don't want them even sewed shut. I want them ripped out or whatever I'm wearing. Because what do you take with you, David? Your memories, the relationships that you have, the people that influence you. That's it.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, Kevin, I really just honor how well practiced you are in regards to the plethora of quotations and statements of inspiration that you've been able to integrate and then share as the moment calls for them. And you really have a gift in that way. So thank you so much. And thank you for forthrightness of heart and your merry mirth and your understanding of the value of the whole, that as we treat each and every person with consciousness, care, and love, so we are affecting the well-being of the whole planet, because who knows who they will touch, and then that person they touch, who they will touch. Everything, who we are each and every day compounds on levels that of which we don't wholly realize. We just know that we are affecting this whole world, this whole planet, and our humanity by who we choose to be. And you are a perfect example of that practice. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. And one quote from the Talmud: "He who saves one life saves the entire world." I love that.
Yeah.
When we're helping one person, we're helping the entire world, and everything in nature is connected. And I wish we can start figuring that out on this planet, that we're not against each other, we're not indifferent, whatever it is. We are part of the same human family.
Yes.
And, when a plane goes down, I don't go, oh, good, there were no Americans that went down. No, the plane went down and we lost somebody in the human family. Yeah. We lost somebody. So grateful for you, David. I want to give you a compliment before we wrap up. Those of you privileged enough to be on this, to hear this and learn from this, David, you have a way of putting words together that create a vision, that create an emotion, that create energy. And I've been around a lot of people. You're one of the best that I've ever seen. You have a unique, beautiful, articulate, stunning way of just how you didn't have that written merry mirth and everything you just talked about. It just came out of your head and your heart. And you do a lot of good too, brother, in the world. And I'll be forever grateful that you trusted a friend, Kurt, to come to a Genshai retreat.
Yes.
You and Jana have greatly impacted Sherry and I, and just this new work I'm working on, like I talked to you this morning about reflection. It was just early hours of the morning. That's why David meditates. That's why David focuses on breath. That's why we reflect the light. So you are a great example of holding a light to light the pathway of someone else. And when you do that, you get wisdom, you get strength, you get courage. And I'm such a fan of what you're doing with this website. And I love you like a brother. You've had grace with me when I had a few things going on. I didn't know if the sun was going to come up tomorrow with Sherry's help. And I'm grateful just for your grace and your kindness and forgiveness, and just being the good friend that you are, David. I love you, brother.
Thank you, dear brother. You are the best. We move forward. Praise the Lord.
Thank you. Thank you.